Welcome back to our broadcast. This is round 7 of the Blitz here in Leuven, Belgium. What do we have as pairings and which game will we focus on, Jan?
We're going to focus on Anish Giri versus Magnus Carlsen. First versus last, but surprisingly, or maybe not that surprisingly, Anish tends to do pretty well against Magnus in all formats. He's lost a game here in the Rapid, but famously never lost in a classical game. I also recall in the Norway Chess Blitz tournament, Anish just crushed Magnus with the white pieces when Magnus had something like 7.5 out of 8. So he's traditionally an unpleasant opponent. Curious if Magnus is going to repeat his Carlsen, which he used in the Rapid against Anish. A bunch of other interesting games, of course. There is Vladimir Kramnik versus Vishy Anand, Fabiano Caruana against MVL, Wesley So against Veselin Topalov, Nakamura versus Aronian. With all these guys being world-class players, it's hard to have a bad pairing, but we are still sticking with the leader for this one because him against Anish is always an exciting matchup. Magnus does not stick to the Carlsen, goes for yet another Gioco Piano, knight f6, d3.
Oh, he chose with knight f6, bishop e7. We don't reach the same positions we've seen in the other games, but still this is theory and they play this position in other tournaments.
Yeah, most top players prefer not to go knight to f6 because that allows the move knight to g5. But it looks like Anish was not ready for a debate there and instead chose a very solid positional line. Now the position looks much more like Ruy Lopez, Chigorin, or whatever we call it, where black went knight a5, c5, knight back to c6. And yeah, white should be slightly better, but it is a position full of pieces, which Magnus normally opts for. Anish thinking here, wearing his white shirt.
And the famous watch, your
and
favorite
the
watch.
big watch. Yeah, he's done a lot of very sensible things. a4, drop the bishop back to a2, knight a3. Typical plans include knight c4, knight e3. One big question for white in these structures is, do you have anything to do with this dark square bishop, or do you just want to try to exchange it, go bishop g5 and bishop f6? Often makes sense fighting for that d5 square, and I'm curious if Magnus is going to stop that now by going h6, which, yeah, would be my choice. The typical black plan is to go h6, rook e8, bishop f8, and take it from there.
He went a6. He's listening to you, but on the other flank.
Yeah, he must have misheard a6, and Anish goes knight c2. a6 was directed against knight c4 when you can chase the knight away with b5. But
rook b8, preparing b5.
Yeah, still curious why Giri decides against bishop g5 here. Maybe he does not like a move like, I don't know, knight e8, and exchanging this bishop for the passive black bishop is less enticing than exchanging it for a knight. He goes h3. You can never go wrong with h3, stopping any bishop g4 action.
Now only h6 is missing and we have all those wrinkles out there. a4 must have been a mistake, it should be a3 then.
And Magnus, having played a6, of course he has to say b5 as well. He grabs some space on the queen side. Conventional wisdom used to be that these Italian positions are less dangerous than the Ruy Lopez positions because you haven't weakened yourself with a6 and b5 as on the Ruy Lopez, but also gained some space. So Magnus does it sort of by hand here. And now the position really does look like Spanish, where white is maybe a little ahead compared to typical Ruy Lopez positions. Anish went knight e3, does not buy my bishop g5 wisdom. Bishop to e6, and the typical choice. Do you want to exchange and play against these double pawns, or do you want to maybe go knight to d5, allowing bishop d5 ed, when this knight does not have an ideal square, but black has a very sound structure?
I think he'll go for knight d5, but I'm very wrong because he takes on e6 and goes for this double pawn f takes e6, so it has its advantages and disadvantages. Black has a semi-open f file, but he controls a lot of squares in the center. On the other hand, these pawns could end up being weak.
Yeah, typically you don't see a bishop here in the structure. You normally get it out of the Italian when this bishop is already on c5 or exchanged. So queen d7 clears the b6 square for the bishop, which would be quite typical maneuver. But for white, it's not so obvious what to do. You could prepare d4, but that takes a long time, and especially with the black bishop landing on b6 might be hard. Magnus goes d5. I always have very mixed feelings about this d5. We've seen it backfire earlier.
Yeah, with the doubled pawns, e6, e5, this really can backfire, as you said. d5 weakens the e5 pawn. We saw it in the game between Magnus Carlsen and Vishen, and then there Magnus applied this and won the game thanks to those weaknesses. We see a close-up of the world champion sporting his shirt full of sponsors.
Yeah, d5, knight g4 is a typical reaction defending against de4. Knights gets exchanged. Knight g4, hg, when I believe Magnus sooner or later should close the position with d4. But it's dangerous. White even has long-term plans like g3, king g2, rook h1, g5, attacking on the king side. Magnus decides to keep the tension, goes bishop to d6, wants to bring his queen around maybe.
Rook a6
Yeah,
on
very
the
logical,
board.
trying to stop queen to f7. I prefer
Rook
Anish's
a8
position.
after rook ea1, white still keeps the a file, but not for long. There could be queen b7, rook a8 coming. c4.
Very aggressively played, but still not carrying a threat really. Neither cd3 or de4 are advantageous exchanges for black, so he probably wants to follow up with b4 or maybe even d4 if it doesn't hang a pawn, trying to open the position. But I still like white's position. If you can find time to go g3, king g2. No, Anish goes d4, Rex in the center.
That leaves us with an interesting position. There are 4 pawns on the 4 central squares, plus this e6 pawn.
Yeah, the logical move would be e takes d, when I guess the idea is c takes d. Black has a good structure, but you gotta worry a little bit about ed followed by queen e6 check. And if you remove the queen, let's say here, the rook could come back to a6 with a vengeance. So Magnus still has some defending to do here. Then again, he does not panic very easily. I'm not quite sure how to handle this. Maybe ed, cd. No, I can't see a good move.
Yeah, you don't want to move the queen to f7, for instance, because then rook a6 could be played, although you can always go back with the queen.
Yeah, we'll see how
Rook
he handles
e8.
it. He keeps the tension, rook e8, ed played, and what does Anif want to do? f4, tactics. Double pin, very nice. You can't go e4 because of bishop d6, and you can't take because of queen takes e8.
Very nice move. It can be seen that he is the husband of Miss Tactics, so he knows tactics.
Magnus does look slightly annoyed. He must have missed his bishop f4 move. Not easy to defend. Queen f7 comes to mind, but then probably just bishop takes e5. Now Anish once again proving to be an unpleasant opponent for Magnus Carlsen. Yeah, well, I won't claim to have a degree in these structures. These d5 advances always seem to invite more trouble than they're worth.
He played queen e7, but does it change anything? We can still grab the pawn.
Well, he wants to recapture and hope nothing too bad happens.
And there is nothing about the pin on the e5 because the bishop defends the queen. All right. So if knight takes, bishop takes, rook e1, he just goes back with the bishop.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Rook e1, bishop f6. Looks like there is nothing direct. No, this seems to be all right for black. But queen e7, which I missed, frankly, after giving my...
He takes on e5, knight takes, or is it bishop takes? Bishop takes e5 he played instead of knight takes. What's the point?
We'll find out. If knight takes, rook e1, there's still knight c6, avoiding material losses, and black should survive.
But he wants to keep
there's
a
some
knight against the bishop.
Let's go bishop
Bishop
e5,
takes.
knight e5, and
They
now what?
don't like bishops. They both get rid of their bishops.
Maybe he wants to go knight d4. But it looks like the black position is barely holding together, but there does not seem to be any immediate way to win material. So nicely calculated by Magnus after this bishop f4 shocker. Yeah, Anish exchanges, knight e5, queen e5.
This will lead to a draw after massive exchanges.
Well, you can try to win a pawn, probably. Check and rook b8.
He goes for it, but I believe that Magnus will manage to defend this position.
Yeah, maybe probably go d4 takes rook d5, reducing the number of pawns, and the best white can hope for is a 3 versus 2 on the king side that should normally end peacefully. But we've seen all kinds of people win all kinds of rook endgames pawn up in this event already, so not a pleasant task ahead. The other option is to go rook e1 check, king h2, rook e2, rook takes b5, rook takes f2, which I guess Magnus is currently thinking about. Even here you might end up a pawn down. If there's something like takes, rook d4, the c4 pawn eventually falls. So you can choose your probably drawn but slightly worse rook endgame, and Magnus has gone for d4 as expected. C takes d, once again rook d5 looks logical, yep. And now Anish should just play a move like f3, defending his cheap 4 pawn.
He goes for it, and after rook takes d4, rook takes b5 that we are expecting. No, h6 first, of course. He doesn't need to be in a rush with the capture on d4, but this is going to be the position you mentioned. We will end up with a 3 versus 2 on the king side sooner or later.
There he goes. Yeah, these pawns will disappear. White has a nominal advantage and he is going to try for a bit. But in general, 3 versus 2 offers very, very reduced winning chances only, especially with a double pawn. I'm sure Annie's going to enjoy torturing Magnus for another 30-40 moves, but I have strong doubts you can win this position against the world champion.
Shall we switch boards? Maybe Caruana Vachier could be a promising position where, as far as I can see, Vachier sacrificed a rook but is attacking the white king.
Okay, there's Fabi in his striped shirt and MVL all black.
This is indeed a rook down, but for many pawns. There are 5 pawns and the white king has no protection. It's just there's no shelter where the white king could hide.
Yeah, it feels like it's maybe just bad for white. e4 and these pawns are steamrolling down the board while the rooks don't really have an impact. They don't have targets. Fabiano tries to exchange queens with queen h2, which is a very sensible thing to do. And MVL has no objections because his d pawn is so fast. He takes and he's going to go d3.
Yeah, this is a funny position where the pawns are more powerful than the rook.
Yeah, the problem is you can't put a rook behind the d pawn, so you have to probably go passive with rook b2, but that would allow a little trick like this. So,
and 4 pawns
trouble
up.
for Mr. Fabiano. He could find nothing better than takes on d3, gave up the knight for the pawn, and after e takes d, rook b2. This is a reasonably simple technical task for MVL, 4 pawns for the exchange. I like 3 too many, 2 too many maybe. Knight g4, king g3. And any move should do the trick. Rook e3 check, I guess, is his intention, but you can also go g5 first. I guess rook e4, also a nice maneuver. So rook on d4. And he's gonna convert. Yeah.
Hopeless
Say
for
rook
Fabiano
e3.
Caruana. In the meantime, Wesley so has won his game against Veselin Topalov, so Wesley has bounced back after the loss from the previous round and has now 15 points out of 25, the same points as Magnus Carlsen, but of course we will still see if Magnus Carlsen draws. He did draw, so he keeps his half-point advantage. Well, keeps it. No, he doesn't keep it. Now Wesley so is just half a point behind. Before it was a full point between the two of them. Now it's only half a point.
Yeah, Vishy Anand and Vladimir Kramnik drew in the meantime, and here we see Hikaru Nakamura against Dr. Levon. Dr. Levon seems to be, I was going to say pawn up, but then I recounted it's equal pawns, so it should end peacefully. I prefer the bishop here. You gotta be a little careful as white with your weakness on e4, but the knight seems to have everything under control. Recapturing the pawn on f6 there, and this should end in a draw. Yeah, players
They
agree.
agreed in a draw, and that concludes round 7 of the Blitz here in Leuven. I think we shall go and have a look at some of the highlights of this round in the other games.
What highlights did we miss?
I think we should see how Maxime sacrificed the rook, and also how Wesley so managed to win against Veselin Topalov.
quiet position with Maxim, being slightly better because of the weakness on a2, but in this position after rook b3, he decided to strike, take on d4, which looks like an exchange of 2 minor pieces for a rook and 2 pawns, but then he did not take on b3, but on a2 instead. And currently he's a piece down for 3 pawns with pieces hanging all over the place. Looks very promising already. And in this position, wow,
so
he
first
decided
he
against knight
sacrificed
c1.
the piece and then...
Very nice combination here. He could have gone knight c1 with a sizable advantage, but he spotted knight takes g3, f takes g, rook takes g2, when white can't recapture because of knight e3, winning the queen, king h1, and Maxim thought, you know what, I'll just keep sacrificing pieces. Let's go rook g3. Very, very nice game by MVL. He estimated correctly that his 18 pawns are more than enough compensation for the rook. There we see Maxim Vachier-Lagrave on the big screen, adjusting the clocks. Oh no, that's not him, that's the arbiter. Apologies.
He slightly changed since the last round.
But yeah, fantastic game by MVL. Kramnik-Anand looks like they exchanged a bunch of things and ended up in a locked position where neither side could make progress. Well, Wesley, so how did he win this on time? This doesn't look like a position where you resign. White is probably better.
Yeah, he's a pawn up, but maybe Topalov lost on time. Can we see the time situation?
Nope.
Let me see if I can say something about the clocks or the last moves are missing.
Yeah, not sure, but a point is a point, no matter how you get it. Therefore, Wesley So continues making Magnus Carlsen's life difficult. When will they face each other? They haven't played today yet, have they?
No, not yet. I think
next round, actually. Yeah.
It might be that Vasily lost on time because the last time situation I see was 6 seconds, so he might have just dropped back to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's it. Over.
Yeah, we get the leaders facing each other next round as Magnus Carlsen with white against Wesley So. Stakes is high. If Magnus wins, he moves on to a comfortable 1.5 point lead, while if he loses, Wesley So would be the surprise leader of the tournament all of a sudden. So that's certainly going to be interesting. Let's bring up the standings to have an overview of who is leading and why. Magnus 15.5, Wesley 15. Vichy and Levon both having good tournaments, only 1 point behind, and everybody else is maybe not yet out of contention. You never know what happens in Blitz, but they have a long way to go to join the conversation.
Very bottom of the standings, Anish Giri with 10 points, Vladimir Kramnik on 10.5, and Hikaru Nakamura, the winner of Paris Grand Chess Tour, on 11.
Yeah, so we said the field is very close together. No one's really collapsed. Anish there on last place, but has scored 10 points already. Everybody is playing tough chess, therefore it's hard to score an overwhelming score. In Paris, we've seen Hikaru and Magnus dominate the field a bit more, both going on runs. Here, it's all very close together.
Yeah, here it seems to be different. There has been no meltdown yet, only mini meltdown, as Malcolm Payne tweeted it about Magnus Carlsen's day one here. A mini meltdown with 2 defeats, was it? Yeah, 2 losses in a row for Magnus Carlsen, and that blunder against Nakamura, just dropping a piece in the opening. But that was the only meltdown we had. A few more blunders, but so far so good. The players are in a better shape than in Paris, I believe.
Yeah, there's also no Laurent Fressinet, who of course is a tremendously strong player, but to replace him with Vichy Anand, who's having a good tournament, makes the field even tougher than it was in Paris. And it goes to show that guys really have problems putting runs together. Paris, we also had Vladimir Kramnik losing it at some point, losing 6 games in a row. We had Fabiano Caruana scoring half out of 7 during the rapid here. Such things have been avoided. Therefore, there's still all to play for. We will be back with round number 8. 2 more games today at 6 p.m. Then the last round is at 6:30. Stay tuned because we're going to get the clash of the leaders, Magnus Carlsen versus Wesley So, in a couple minutes. See you then.